Welcome everybody to the latest edition of Magic's webinar series. We are the Memphis Area Geographic Information Council, and let's see. Today we've got Randy Hale with North River Geographic Information Systems, and I might have said that just a little bit wrong. North River Geographic Systems. Anyway, he's going to be presenting to us on an open source GIS project he's been working on. Just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements before we turn it over to Randy. We are going to be having Magic will have a general meeting next month on Tuesday, July 18th at our usual location at the library. And we're going to have a couple local presentations, including Sean Anderson with Tipton County, who's on the call today. And we'll also be doing a recap of the Esri conference. So please come and join us for that at the library on Tuesday, July 18th. We'll be sending out an announcement shortly on that. Also want to remind you all, we've announced the annual conference for November. I think we're on for the 16th and 17th this year. It's the Thursday and Friday right before Thanksgiving. And currently we are have our call for presentations out. We are looking for presenters. So if you have any projects you've been working on, or any colleagues that have projects they've been working on that would like to get a chance to present to a professional audience in the Memphis area, please send us an abstract and we'd love to consider you. And one more quick housekeeping announcement. If any of y'all are affiliated with colleges or universities in the area, we are looking for student ambassadors, for one for each university or college with GIS program. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Randy. Randy's, as I said, is the owner of North River Geographic. And Randy, take it away.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we will do it. So, man, hopefully you guys got time for a story, because this is gonna be weird and fun, hopefully. So this is a little bit open source, it's a little bit cultural, it's a little bit everything. And this is going to talk about essentially 2 cemeteries here in town, and you know, kind of my attempts to help the geographically challenged, I guess, get these graves mapped. Because man, cemeteries are like the perfect GIS project. You got location, which hardly ever changes, information, you got all this other stuff, and they're just kind of, to me, kind of fascinating from a mapping standpoint on how this works. So my intro, I run as you know, was being said, North River Geographic Systems. I been doing this for way too long. I figured out the other day, I think I've been doing this since Automatic for the People came out with REM, 92, 93, 94. Worked for the feds for a while for Tennessee Valley Authority, and left there to do consulting. And mainly now I'm working with open source. That's kind of my fun thing to do. So QGIS post GIS, or QGIS post GIS. I'm a business partner with Merging Maps, which is like mobile QGIS. You can take it out on your phone. Part of the bigger organization, OSGeo. I guess I'm a member at large. I really don't know what I am in that one, but it's the OSGeo US chapter, and I love me some OpenStreetMap. So I tend to dabble in all the open source stuff, and I guess my only flex is going to be, I haven't had to touch ArcPro since 2.4. It's been too long, but it's good. So, and if you want, Sean said mention it, I'll mention it. I'm doing an intro to QGIS class. It's the one I've taught the longest, and it's kind of like it's patterned after the intro to art class, sort of. And this is like an intro to QGIS class, and it goes through all the basics. And I'm doing a new one called Tips and Tricks. So I'm gonna hopefully teach that one. It's the next thing I want to talk about. Coming up. Those come up in July. Go to the website, you'll see the information on there. You know, if you want to join in, if you want to do something a little bit different, if you have a need for more capacity but not in capacity for more billing, let me know. And yeah, so hey, instead of going to the San Diego conference, you should come to Baltimore in the fall. We're doing the big open source QGIS meeting, or no, open source, the OSGeo meeting. Of course, this is a national North American, Canada, Mexico, anybody else in North America can come to this, up in Baltimore, October 23rd through the 25th. So it's going to be fun. 2 days. There's going to be one workshop day and 2 days of talks and a lot of fun. So if you get the chance, you want to see something completely off the wall, come visit. So here we go, cemeteries. So I did this talk. This is probably the only other time I'm going to do this talk. As this goes along, because this project, it's been kind of meandering, and I was preparing to do this in North Carolina, and I was kind of struggling for an opening. Like, do I do a funny opening? Do I do a weird opening? You know, how do I open up this talk? And so I literally opened the news, and boom, a historic Black cemetery in Tampa was accidentally sold. Man, you lose a whole cemetery. Roughly 11,000 graves in Tampa. Tampa had it, and there was a tax issue. Somebody kind of forgot. It went on the auction block and got sold. And my point kind of with this was, would that have happened to one of the more prominent cemeteries here in Chattanooga or anywhere in town? No. But it was problematic for this one. And, you know, the two cemeteries I'm going to talk about are both Black cemeteries, African-American cemeteries, that have a very unique history to Chattanooga. And it's crazy. You lose a whole cemetery. Developer comes in, buys it. And I kind of did some digging this morning, like, what happened with that? So the developer, this kind of happened in January of this year, a little bit before the talk I did, and the guy bought a whole cemetery for $18,000, 22 acres or however many acres it was. It was a big cemetery, and the guy spent like $9,000 cleaning up the tax stuff. The developer, he spent $30,000 doing something, and he sold it back to the city for $100,000. So the city is now probably in this for a lot more than they originally planned on. And it's amazing. It's an amazing read. I would love to not be the PR person for the city of Tampa trying to explain this. I also have a cat that's going to get up here and help me. This is Chewy. He just brought me his mouse in the middle of the talk. So where I got fascinated with cemeteries, several years ago, I was with my dad, and my dad is from, I guess you'd call it like the Middle Eastern part of the state, Pikeville, Tennessee, very rural area. He grew up very poor, and there's a family cemetery. So he could be buried there for free in the family cemetery. And there was a panic about 10 years ago because they were running out of space. People were in a tizzy, as mom would say, about, you know, cemeteries filling up, and people are getting older, people are passing away, and they were worried, how are we going to expand the cemetery? There's plenty of farmland around to expand it, but there was a huge discussion. And basically the guy that was over the cemetery, which was a unpaid volunteer position, sorry about the cat, just said, hey, if you're going to plan on being buried here, and I don't care how old you are, go ahead and put a brick somewhere so we know where to put you, and like write a number on it or do something. And I was sitting there, I mean, as a GIS person going, oh my Lord, what? And flash forward to later that year, I was with my mom, and these both happened on the decoration day. So these very small cemeteries would have a day where all the families of people buried there would come together and donate $5, $10, $15, $20. And that dealt with mowing, opening and closing graves, grave maintenance, perhaps buying some more land. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into a cemetery, which, something I didn't really think about until the last few years. Of just like, man, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into this. It's not necessarily a money maker for people. And if you flash back even farther than that, when Randy was much younger, my grandfather died, and oops, we buried him in the wrong spot. And so apparently the cemetery didn't have a map, and they buried my grandpa in the wrong spot, which led to a tremendous amount of angst, anger, and fit having out at this Tennessee Georgia Memorial Park Cemetery. It was, looking back now, it was pretty funny, but now then there was no humor in this at all. They had to trade a plot with somebody else, which means somebody else had to trade a plot, and there was this whole domino effect of getting somebody. You just can't dig somebody up in the state of Georgia and move them, and it's probably as problematic in Tennessee. It would have been a lot easier to just like, hey, let's pick him up and move him 6 feet in one direction. Couldn't do it. And I kind of think about that occasionally, especially dealing with all this, dealing with all this stuff. So I like volunteering to do stuff. And I was telling everybody before this started, as a small business, doing what I do, like I said, I've been doing this for a while. There's no shortage of free work, and used to, I would tackle almost any volunteer project, be it for whatever reason. And these days I'm a little bit pickier. I want to be happy with my volunteer project. I want it to be kind of challenging and fun. And I was reading up, and there was this group here in town called the AACPF, the African American Cemetery Preservation Fund, which was about 2 or 3 groups that had come together over these historic cemeteries that were here in town. And what ended up happening, the first thing that happened, sort of, the first domino, I guess you could say, in this whole mess was Becknob Cemetery. So it was opened in 1865 by a man who's named Beck, last name Beck, and Chattanooga was a spot for a lot of slaves to come during the Civil War. Since we were a rail yard, it was real easy to get on the tracks and just go. And everybody came here, and they settled on the north end of town, and they called it Fort Contraband. And it was a whole city across the river from downtown Chattanooga that, through time has been kind of wiped clean. I mean, it was not really a formal, there weren't really buildings being built. There was a lot of tents. People were dying. And Beck came together and said, well, I've got like an 1.5 acre of land, bring people here. And so within walking distance of where this was, there was a cemetery. And what ends up happening, they get this going. So Becknob kind of comes into the limelight through a series of events, and then Pleasant Gardens comes into a limelight through a series of events. It's the second cemetery. In 2015, a developer almost bulldozed Becknob. Whether the developer knew the cemetery was there, they said they didn't. I'll have to say, okay, I'm going to believe them and say that they didn't. Kind of hard to not notice the cemetery, but as the bulldozer pulled into the cemetery, they went, oh, and backed out of it. And Johnson was hung on the Walnut Street Bridge in like 1906 or somewhere in that range. The story of him came back up probably in the early 2010s. Somebody wrote a book about it. The city is trying to deal with that. And as it turns out, Mr. Johnson was buried in Pleasant Gardens. And I actually lived near Pleasant Gardens and didn't even know it existed. So the AACPF, through these 2 groups, came together. They were formed. They received some grants. Southeast Tennessee Development District gets involved, which brings in MTSU. And through all of this, Becknob ends up on the historic register, which brings a tremendous amount of legal protection in case there's vandalism. And there's been a lot of vandalism at Becknob, more so than you would think. And it got, Beck Knob closed in the 50s. So it's had, let's see, 73 years of people probably not liking that cemetery. It's now the most popular place in town, North Chattanooga. And then right in the middle of it, you've got this, cemetery. So, like I said, I like doing volunteer, a volunteer project's got to make me feel good. Last year was good. I did a lot of work as a consultant. It was a good year. So I decided I wanted to do something for the community, specifically for my area and for like the software I use. Because the software, QGIS, PostGIS, GeoServer, all that stuff is really a community effort because there's no company backing it. It's up to the users, me, to kind of chip in and help. So I donated some money to QGIS, became a small business supporter. I donated money to GeoServer thanks to a meeting we had in Nashville covering open source at Vanderbilt. And yeah, things were good. Things were good. And so I got sitting there wondering, well, what about my backyard? I'm funding software. I'm doing all this really cool stuff, but in crud, I live here in Chattanooga. What can I do? So if you were coming into Chattanooga, this is I think I stole this off got the imagery from the state's ARC server. I think this is state imagery. To give you an idea of where we're talking about, in case you haven't been to Chattanooga or you have, Chattanooga, assuming you can see my mouse, is over here. Pleasant Gardens is right in the middle. Beck Knob will be in the upper left corner over in the north end of Chattanooga, North Chat. And if you're coming in from Knoxville, you'll pass Pleasant Gardens first. You're coming in from Memphis, Nashville, depending on how you come in, you'll pass Beck Knob first. And so if you just come into town, you hear these common names of places: Easter Edge, Brainerd, the airport area, St. Elmo. It just gives you some context of where we're talking about in this. So Beck Knob, this is Beck Knob. If you notice here to the west, brand new spanking subdivision. And if you notice that brand new subdivision, they got a swimming pool right next to cemetery. I don't know if any of you have seen Poltergeist, the original one, but oh man, I almost guarantee you there were probably bodies there when they dug the pool. Again, this was encroachment on a cemetery. Whether they knew or not, I'll have to assume that they didn't know. But that is it. And so what ended up happening, the development started, and the neighborhood, which wasn't really thrilled with the development because it's a very tightly packed development, weren't very happy. The cemetery was covered in kudzu. And the cemetery kind of looks like this. They've got a sign out front that says Beck Knob, and that's about it. Not very well fenced off. Nothing very good happening. And if you just drove past it without that sign there, you would just think, hey, there's a park here or something. It's very steep. The photo doesn't do it justice on crawling up it, but there's been several ankles get snapped going up this thing. Hearst United Methodist Church here in town caretakes the cemetery, and they have cleanup days and other things going on there. And this is a shot of the few of the gravestones that are there. If you notice, some of the gravestones are on the ground. Again, it has been vandalized several times in the past. People have remade, I think, headstones. Some of these look like they're concrete in composition. So I think somebody had a form. They were able to just stamp them out. They're very nice, neat headstones. And up at the top and in different spots, you find more older headstones, original headstones. And some have just been toppled over. And where do they belong? I have no clue. So I went and talked to them and said, hey, I do stuff. I make maps. I know a thing about maps. Can I help you guys map the cemetery? And I talked to one of my friends, Jeff Simmons, who will not get enough credit during this talk. I called him up because no one's really sure where people are buried in this cemetery. There was no rhyme or reason as to people getting buried. They were just buried as they passed away. I called Jeff and I said, do you have a a GPR, a ground penetrating radar unit, and or do you know somebody that has one? Jeff co-owns a company in Atlanta called Platinum Geomatics. They do surveying, they do a lot of, very tight technical things. And he said, you know what? We'll come up and do it. We've got GPR, we've got survey equipment. This sounds cool. We're going to make it work. And so he sent 2 or 3 guys up here for a week to just kind of work on it. And out of that, we got a map. Now, there wasn't a lot of open source in this because we didn't really have a plan at this point. I didn't really expect Jeff to come up and say, yeah, we're going to make this happen. And so he talked to the Reverend James, who's over the cemetery. He's part of Hearst United Methodist. And they came up. And when they got started, the AECPF, Mr. James, several people said, hey, we've only got 120 people buried up here as far as we can tell. Is MTSU's done a newspaper search and this place closed in the 50s and we know it was open in 1865-ish range. And so we tried the GPR and it was way too steep. The unit just couldn't, it was hard to maneuver. So they went out and just marked depressions in the ground because we were 90% sure that every depression was probably a grave. And if you notice on the map, the little cream colored rectangles, we had a little bit of a flub up mapping it. We were supposed to mark the head and the foot of the grave, or at least the 2 ends. Ended up marking the center. And so from the center, we just extrapolated out, okay, a 6-foot grave, 3 feet wide, 6 feet long. We'll just go with that. And generally it worked out. So we went from 120 to 400 graves on this acre-ish of land. And so I got to come back and say, hey, guess what? We got like 400 people up here. And they were expecting more than 120, but not 400. And the cool thing about this, or the weird thing, so the property line was pulled from Hamilton County. This is what they have as the official deed. Whether this was digitized in or cogoed in or however it need to be put in, surveyed. As far as I know, this thing has never been surveyed. And so this points out to, we need to get it surveyed. It needs to have a legal, survey done on it, because we marked everything that they cleared off. Notice they didn't clear off this whole northeast-ish corner over here. They just they thought the property line actually ran more where you see the stoppage. And so when I bring the map up and show them, we actually walked up there and walked into the woods, and there's graves going all the way past the 830 contour line, all the way up to the corner across the top of the fence. So there's graves up here. Now this turns back into more housing, and that's not good because Chattanooga's growing. I don't know how well, Memphis area is growing, but good Lord, we're throwing up houses all over the place. So the plan is to go back and finish this. I started talking to the Southeast Tennessee Development District. How can we get this finished? Jeff has volunteered to come back up and finish it. We kind of wasted this winter. I wanted to do it this winter because no snakes, no ticks. Really, ticks bother me more than snakes, but we really need to get that end cleaned off to see how many. My guess is we're going to have 600 to 700 graves. You can easily cram, according to the historian working on this, about 800 to 900 people in a graveyard if you don't care for personal space. So we're thinking 600-700 people here. That's a lot. That's a lot of unmarked graves. And there's probably 120 tombstones, which is what got us the original number. So we're going to go back, take the data that Jeff provided. He provided in a CAD file, QGIS converted it into a geopackage shape file. I can dump it into anything. And then the end result of this is going to be a small web interface. Probably run out of GitHub. Probably you can build a map in GitHub and have a very quick and easy a leaflet style map that people can click on, and it just runs and it works and it's simple and you don't have to pay for it. Because, you know, in all of this, we don't want to incur more charges on the church. We would encourage them to get a grant, you know, or something to help push this along. So with them being a historic spot now in Tennessee, that opens up the door for grants. And maybe we can go back and say, okay, we need a grant for fencing, we need a grant for surveying, we need a grant, you know, for maybe a proper website. We attach the map to the website. To give you an idea how steep it was, so after Jeff went through and marked it, luckily they spray painted each grave. Each grave got a dot on it. And kudzu grows quick. So we went back with flags and we flagged everything. So if you were, hopefully you can see the little hints of pink. Mr. James's brother, who's in the yellow, was following me up the hill, and we were just sticking flags everywhere. So we would all carry, I think we put out about 460 flags the day we flagged it. We cleaned out Ace Hardware of these flags. So we got everything flagged. It's going to give us an idea of where things are. The plan is in the future to go back, measure the grave sites now that we kind of have a definitive answer, and go, okay, is this a child's grave? Is this an adult's grave? Because we feel like probably on looking where you're looking at in the picture, it's probably children over to the side, or young adults, or, you know, younger people. We don't think, at least the historian feels like they probably have their own separate spot here. So it's something we need to document. Again, we won't know who. They're unmarked graves, but, you know, at least we know somebody's there. So 2 months later, it looked like this. You can see it kind of went nuts again. And so MTSU was holding a tombstone cleaning day. You come up, wash the headstone in a solution. I don't know what the solution is, but you clean it, you let it sit, it brightens up, and it doesn't damage the stone. And so they've been slowly walking through. Again, if you can see through Zoom and just kind of let your eyes relax and look, there's a lot of pink flagging hanging around up there. And they had a dedication ceremony. I got invited to it, which was pretty cool. The church came together. Coca-Cola volunteered a pop-up truck. So we had Cokes, and we had sing-alongs, and we had maps, and we had stories about the cemetery. And if you look again, if you look back, you can now see more tombstones kind of scattered around. If you look now and you see the tombstones there, we were about 1, 2, 3, 4, this row right here, which I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows from the bottom corner is about what you're seeing for tombstones. So it's a pretty unique place. If you come to Chattanooga, if you want to go look at cemetery, give me a shout. We'll go over there. With any luck, we'll catch Mr. James over there, get him to go, because he's got some great stories on the cemetery through the years, you know. So we're going to tackle it. We're going to throw some tech at it. We're going to get it done somehow, some way. Now, so we were sitting there talking about that, and then one of the people from the ACPF said, man, wish we could do this at Pleasant Gardens. And I went, what? What's that? And they said, oh, that's the other cemetery. And I went, there's two? And that's pretty cool. I mean, my family's had a long-running fascination with cemeteries. So Pleasant Gardens, 1890, it was the city's first segregated cemetery by the prominent Black funeral home in town. They helped put this together, and it was, you know, for community. It was a place people could go. It was a place that people had to go to. Opened in 1891. That's a minute. Closed in 1970. I was born in 1971. This thing was closed before I was born. It's 22 acres. It started out as like 5 and grew to 22. There's been 50 years of work after it closed to kind of save it. Because when it closes, who pays for maintenance? Who pays for tree removal? Who pays for putting dirt back on graves as graves sink as the caskets collapse? there's no way to pay for this. So it's been kind of a low-key communal effort to do it. And again, Back Knob, we just talked about up in the upper corner, Pleasant Gardens, right in the center of the screen. If we look at it using Hamilton County's parcel viewer, it's weird up there. I don't live terribly far from here. It's a very packed area. It's an old neighborhood. This is the older part of Chattanooga, probably one of the oldest parts of Chattanooga, and we got a 22-acre basically nature preserve here in the middle of all of this. And yes, there is a pond. We've got a not so great neighbor. From what I understand here, he's encroaching on the cemetery and is trying to move the fence. We're pretty sure there are graves on his side of the fence currently. Not a lot of parking. There is a Jewish cemetery next to it. The Workman Cemetery actually is right here. And you got 22 acres of graves. So we're guessing anywhere between 11 and 16,000 people. There are no official records. So that's just a quick napkin guess as to how many people are up here. And so you can go park. It's closed. You can walk through it. It's weird. You find a lot of half-buried vaults. And at first I thought this thing had been washed out, and you see a lot of them. So this is kind of a cross between like a New Orleans style setup where you don't bury people in the ground because of, you know, water and everything else, but you're sitting on top of the ground. The bad thing is the casket is going to rot, and if you have a tree that hits, because this happens up there, you're gonna find people, you're gonna find bones in there. So, and again, there's no maintenance going on up there. The other fascinating thing, Otis Hot Sauce Washington. So he died in 1965. Very nice headstone. Somebody comes in and leaves him a 40 and some hot sauce. Still doing it. This is recent, like beer that has been left. And what's so interesting, while you're up there, you find a lot of the tombstones say husband of Maddie Washington. So to me, it kind of kicks him down a notch a little bit, saying, yeah, this is Otis. Oh, by the way, his wife is Maddie Washington, and, you know, son of Betty and William Washington. So it's a very interesting way to do a tombstone. A lot of the tombstones are handmade in Pleasant Gardens. And again, if you look at the picture on the left, you're gonna see some tombstones are toppled over. Some are squares turned on their sides, so they're like this little diamond shape. Also notice there's a tree falling over that hasn't been removed. A lot of these homemade ones have crucifixes that have been affixed to them for some reason. We don't know. The historian is kind of perplexed because this is the only place this happens. You get these a lot in here. And again, if you just walk through 22 acres of just hanging out, walking through the cemetery, there is a pauper cemetery on the right, which is completely unmarked, sunken graves, no clue how many people are here. This part, if I go back to here, is actually down in the more, I should say, the southern part of the cemetery. The theory is there's actually two cemeteries. Here. There was one that was started for poorer people. There was another one for richer people, and the two grew together and became Pleasant Gardens. And there's a lot of theory on that happening because there's a lot of mention of a second cemetery very close to here, and there's not a second cemetery. So Ed Johnson, who I mentioned earlier, it's his grave. The unfortunate thing with his grave, everybody's become so enamored with the story, they're going up and doing the etchings where they or the chalk, and you put a piece of paper on it and rub chalk or charcoal and get the the tombstone off. It's starting to damage the stone a lot. And so the word has went out, please don't do that. Take a picture, take a lot of pictures. Don't don't do the rubbings. My dad, who wouldn't get out of the way because he couldn't hear me yell, hey, get out of the way. there's several wells, what we think are wells up there that they were using to water flowers or plants or something, but there's a couple of just stone features that look like wells. Maybe they were signs. Nobody knows. I was up there in the early spring, and I mean, one whole grave covered in daffodils. That was pretty cool. Also noticed a lot of trees down. This cemetery has literally everything that you can have wrong with it: grave maintenance, encroachment, trees coming down, animals. There's just a lot of problems up here that I think a GIS could help. Again, something I want to kind of help provide, if we get to it. And so what are we going to do? When I came to the Magic Conference, you guys had both the people there I wanted to talk to, the Trimble guy, Kenny, and the other guy with Bad Elf. And I both got really good advice from both of them about mapping a cemetery. And so they said we need a centimeter grade unit. We've talked to the Bad Elf people, we talked to Trimble people, and EOS kind of came into it, the EOS Arrow units. I want to get back knob cleaned up. We're kind of, that's, again, I said we're kind of in limbo there. And if you look at it, if you can bury 600 people on an acre, you may have 13,000, and I think probably 16,000 unique data points for Pleasant Gardens. It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of data collection. And the other thing is too, like Lutra Consulting has donated Merge Maps, which is the mobile part of this. So you can collect data on your phone, merges into QGIS, you can do what you want with it. And it works out really well. And so discussing with the historian, discussing with McNobb, the plan is at absolute worst, we're going to get a unique identifier for each grave. So we're at least going to get a point in the center. That way we just know, we've got a spot. If we're good, and if we've got, ample ability, we catch each corner. That way we know if it was a child or an adult. Possibly there may be overlap. That there's rumor has that they may have buried people on top of people, or people may be stacked side by side. Catch the headstone, catch the footstone if there is one. And then a lot of these graves have curbing. They have brick or some type of ornament around the edges. Sometimes it denotes families, sometimes it's just the grave. Catch that. And so realistically, you're looking at 4, 8, 11 data points a grave, 16, that's a lot of math. It's a lot of points. Collect this in post GIS, send people out with the with units to collect. We've also got to get a GPS unit to do this, so we're kind of waiting on that also. So field work, we grid off cemetery, we've talked about it. We do probably 1/4 acre grids, 2 people collecting points, and we at least hit the center, 2 other people coming back, or a second group. If we can get ahead of the second group, we can have multiple groups coming out. We've got a lot of volunteers that want to help. So we want to transcribe the headstones, describe the area, we flag it, we unflag it. Somebody said, can we do this in 2 weeks? And I said, no, probably a year's worth of weekends, which probably is going to end up being 2 years worth of work, probably. And then go to the local funeral homes and do a record search. Again, it's going to be a lot of work. So you're going to have a lot of people chipping in. I can't do it all. Again, this is the example of the curbing in the database. Essentially a table that'll hold photos. Again, do this in post GIS starting out. Collect date of birth, date of death. In a lot of cases, we're going to get the year. In some cases, we're going to get nothing. As I'm starting to learn now about headstones, people don't put the complete date on the headstone. I may just get a year. I may get the year of death. It's going to be weird trying to do this. Vegetation survey, that's important to hear because there's a lot of unique vegetation to the cemetery. There's at least one road going through here. There's 2 trails, and there's a whole lot of steps that are starting to decay. And again, get this thing surveyed because we've got a problematic neighbor that needs to know where his legal complaining can end. And catch some of the buildings, or there were a couple of buildings up here, and at least get this. And it's going to be a pretty big deal to get this done. Again, PostgreSQL, this is going to be all open source. Probably in the beginning, a leaflet map, and I went and talked to the Hamilton County's GIS department. They're an Esri shop. I really don't care. I mean, as much as I love open source, data is data, whether it resides in your whatever system it resides in, but this needs to reside in a couple of places to keep it from getting lost. So I'll probably go talk to the library, talk to the county. One copy will stay at the ACPF, and I will keep one here archived somewhere. We want the data to go around. What I want to see happen, basically get this thing surveyed and then get statistics on the cemetery, because it's going to show there are 2 cemeteries up there. The other thing I want to do, the weird thing I want to do, get this place on National Historic Register, which is going to happen if we get this done. It'll probably happen if we don't get it done, but I think it'll speed things up. And a set of procedures that can be duplicated, because in all of my digging, there are no set rules and regs. There is no set schema for a cemetery. People kind of do their own thing. There's commercial software, which again, this thing's been closed for 53 years. Nobody's got money for commercial. There isn't money. So we got to do this as cost efficient as we can, or beg for grant money. And so out of all of that, my evil plan, come up with a simple plug-in to QGIS to do cemetery mapping. Something so simple, anybody can go out and do it. Of course, it's going to come with a host of problems. How do we collect the data? How do we do the stuff? Maybe write up a manual to do this, because again, back at my dad's cemetery, they can't keep up. And there's a lot of very small cemeteries throughout the state. The state just released their cemetery mapping data file. It's up, it's shared out through some ArcGIS Online, something with the state. They don't let you download the data, unfortunately, but you can go look and make something so easy that a church, or at least an individual, can at least read the manual and go, oh, I can maintain at least a small map. Get this stuff recorded. It's important somehow. But my evil plan has problems. Can somebody navigate QGIS? Remember when you first started using ArcMap or ArcInfo or ArcPro or QGIS? It's difficult. GIS is not simple, and I want to make it simple. I don't want to recreate Find a Grave. Find a Grave is great. It's not what I want to do. What's the accuracy on your phone? The USDA keeps a database on that. They actually test and go out and see what happens. Maybe we do this with compass. Maybe there's some instances I take a point and then we start shooting bearings and distances from a Brunton. I've got a Bad Elf, actually. I became kind of so enamored with Bad Elf, I bought their surveyor model, which was like $600, 1 meter. 1 meter's in tree cover, not going to cut it, because I've been playing around testing it. Okay, the weird thing I did, the drones. You guys are probably used to drones. You've heard about drone, what was it, drone to map, or drone deploy, or whatever commercial thing Esri pushes out. There's an open source thing called Open Drone Map, and it's got a web component called ODM, Web Open Drone Map. Free to download. You can purchase it. I would suggest purchasing it, throw them some money, help fund the project. But you can go out with your phone, and what I am learning is that I can set my phone up to take 1 picture a second, and I can walk around a statue, a building, or something, and from that recreate a model of the thing in the middle. So if you see this, every one of these blue and yellow things is me walking around actually a Civil War monument. Can I model this? And what I learned, I was walking too fast. I got to do this slower. What people have been doing is actually taking their cell phones, hooking them to an extendable pole, possibly 20, like a painting pole 20 feet up, hook your phone to it, and catch a very slight oblique. Use ODM to map it. It will generate points. Again, your weak spot's going to be the phone location, but you can generate 3D models out of this. So we may be able to model part of the graveyard or model a very small graveyard, walking around with a pole and your phone and just, laying out kind of a walking path to catch every angle of the cemetery. You can build a 3D model of the cemetery. That's kind of, can we do it? It takes a lot of tech, but in some ways less tech to kind of go this route to capture stuff. You can almost read the inscription on this. I was going to demo it, but just having some problems navigating. This is kind of something brand new. And that's it. That's the crazy thing. So, building models, capturing data, databases. As this proceeds, it's all going to go on to GitHub. So we'll have a schema up there that people can download and work with, and hopefully map a cemetery, because it'll be fun and it needs to be done. Everybody's got a cemetery that needs to be mapped somewhere. So thoughts, angst, question, did everybody run? There's at least 4 of y'all here. Everybody's asleep.
No, thank you, Randy.
Cool.
I have comments, maybe not so much a question, but I worked on pretty much identical projects many years ago, and
Nice.
it seems like I had some of the same challenges you did as far as landscape and tree cover and
Yeah.
headstones being just completely buried by a foot of earth and stuff like that. What we ended up using was instead of GPR was the flux gate gradiometer.
Oh, cool.
And that worked really well. But if you have too many trees, it probably will be tricky.
Yeah.
But the geomatic people you worked with, if they have access to a gradiometer, I think that is a really good tool to find stuff like this, because it all has to do with soil disturbance, which is what it essentially is. And then for the GPS problems, we ended up just using a total station range pole.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
To get around
and that's what I've asked for. The Tennessee Development District said they need to buy a new GPS. I said, well, if you do, here are the 3 choices. Like, here's what I want to make this happen. And so we're kind of waiting to see. I don't know. There's been a hang up on that because it's going to be a chunk of change, but they're going to be able to foot it better than the AECPF to do it. So yeah. Total station would rock in doing this.
But it's fascinating, here in Memphis, the main project or the main purpose that we were looking for was mass graves from the 1878 yellow fever epidemic. But as an extension of that, you're looking at historical cemeteries and seeing what was there.
Yeah, there was one case of here we had a yellow fever outbreak in I think it was the late 1800s, between 1860 and 1900, and there is a mass grave downtown next to the university, which apparently is now under part of the university because they didn't realize how big it was and built Holt Hall. One of the halls got built on top of the cemetery. So interesting. That would be cool.
And one of the cool things that we found is not necessarily mass graves. I don't know how many equals mass, but you mentioned there may be spots where people were kind of buried on top of each other and stuff like that, buried in the same plot. With the gradiometer, we noticed on a couple of occasions that there were 3 what we could identify as maybe belt buckles in the same pretty much. So you'd be able to kind of see, you get some more insight into maybe what's there. I don't know. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is interesting. And we had a discussion at this. We had a meeting up there a few months ago, and we were just talking can we go to one funeral home in particular, and the fear is they're going to be really defensive because probably records show they sold graves 2 or 3 times. So people were, buried deep. First person got buried pretty deep. Second person and they just kept stacking people. Which is you know, a huge no-no, but very common, apparently more common than I thought it was to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, the 3 cemetery projects I've done, I have to make sure to build into the database a potential for 3 bodies.
Yeah.
Because you just never know until you really dig in there.
Yeah. And that was my plan to build, you know, we have one point that's basically the identifier and then a related table to just start building out. Because if we run into multiple people, like for instance, at my dad's cemetery, we were up there not too long ago and I was just kind of doing another run through. How's this going to work? We found a grave with 3, a headstone with 3 inscriptions. So we think 2 people were buried and 1 was cremated. Don't think they would bury 3 up there, but I don't know. You know, that'd be, again, I have to find somebody to ask.
You know, you can always try to probe it.
Yeah, it is true.
If it's only 2 feet deep, maybe.
Yeah. I gotta be careful. My dad's cemetery, somebody probably shoot me. It's pretty rural, and I was up there about a month ago. We went for I don't know if you saw my t-shirt, but it was a bluegrass day. And I told Dad, can we stop by the cemetery for about 30 minutes? And while we were up there, I was GPSing and just trying out some stuff. And I was getting side-eyed a lot. But happened to be a couple other people in the cemetery. I thought, oh man, I need to pick a day when nobody's up here to swing through. But that's cool. Yeah, it's
nobody realized that when I went to work at the city of Olive Branch that I would be the one that had to mark all the graves to be buried.
Oh,
I never thought that would be part of the GIS manager's job until I made a map of it. And they were like, oh, well, you can go out there and probe and put down the PVC pipe on where they're supposed to dig from now on. So I feel like I'm knocking on a grave every other week.
Yeah. And that's, you know, the interesting thing with both these cemeteries, nobody's getting buried there anymore. The last grave in Pleasant Gardens was, we think 2008. Until we really do this, we're not going to completely know, but apparently, I mean, in 2008, you had to basically have broken into the cemetery to get this done. So I don't know how they dug the grave unless it was hand done, which would have been family going up, you know, just digging, but which would have been scary. I mean, God, don't tell them what you found while you were up there digging. As dense as some of the graves are, no doubt somebody got dug up. Awesome. Yeah, it's cool to talk to people who have done this because I'm just like, I'm enthusiastic about doing it, but I know there's going to be limitations to what I can and can't do going into this. Because I mean, I'm not a historian, I'm not an archaeologist. Just I think it's going to be good. It'll be good for the neighborhood. It'll be good for Brainerd to get this done because it'll be a very good talking point on the history of this cemetery on both of them. So, and then somebody said, oh, but what about the third one? I haven't heard about that one yet. So we shall see.
All right. Well, thanks. Anybody have any other questions or suggestions?
Yeah. If you ever get bored, email me with suggestions. I am open for suggestions.
I'll say I was interesting to hear we have some expertise here in Memphis with both Scott and Lee. It's Canopy Spatial if anybody is looking for their services.
Yeah. I talked to a lady. I went to North Carolina and did this same talk. And like I said, I probably won't do this talk again until something happens. But she worked in Charleston, South Carolina, where the city was known for bulldozing graves. And she was going through some of the cultural issues with mapping cemeteries because, you know, it can get kind of sticky in certain situations. So it was interesting hearing from her on the cultural aspect of maybe they don't want it mapped. Maybe nobody wants them mapped, and could be, you know, I'm there to provide a service, but if nobody wants to do it, I don't want to force anybody to map something they don't want to do. So it's been an interesting, just, you know, I get bored on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday night or something, just search cemeteries.
Well, Randy, you've always got some great stories.
Yeah, it's a lot of stories.
You get yourself out there in the middle of it, in the thick of it.
That's what I was
So,
telling. Yeah, right before this started, I went up there a few months ago, and it was a good foggy, misty day, kind of getting dark, and walking around the cemetery, and I found a cracked grave, like one there was bones, and I don't get spooked easy, but I left. that was enough cemetery. But cool. Well, thanks for having me come talk virtually.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it, and thanks to all y'all who came and joined us today. We do plan to put this out on our YouTube channel, with Randy's permission, of course. Randy, that'll be all right.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
So,
I don't think
look for, we'll send out an email probably in a couple of days once that's posted. And again, just want to remind you all to come join us at the library in Memphis next month on it's third Tuesday of the month. I think it's the 18th. We'll be doing a recap of the Ezra user conference, and we'll have a couple of local presentations from the Memphis area. And again, if you weren't on the beginning of the call, we are looking for presenters for our annual conference in November. If you're interested or know anybody who would be, please send us an email. All right. Thanks, y'all. We're going to go ahead and sign out for the day and get back to our day jobs, I guess. So thank you, everybody. Y'all have a great day.